The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are here for another excellent webinar, and I want to thank you all as members of FMC by registering today and supporting FMC, which makes it possible for us to offer these webinars on a monthly basis. And I know that you're probably in the midst of the busiest time of the year in your lives. So we were pulling this specific webinar series together because we felt like it would be very relevant during the actual farmers market season to talk about the media and how we can get media attention. So hopefully you will learn some tidbits or get some information about new strategies and techniques that you can apply to your markets and your communities right away. A few housekeeping notes. We have our usual format where you can type in questions to the little question box that's in your control panel. And so you can do that anytime, and we really encourage you to ask questions throughout the whole thing. If we don't get to your question during the actual presentation, then we will answer your questions at the end. And since I'm moderating, I may not be able to type in, oh, I see a very bad typo on the screen. I am not the executive director. I am the membership coordinator, and usually I will be typing in the responses to your questions as we go through the webinar, and if I don't get a chance to do that during the presentation, we'll make sure that we get to it at the end. So let me move on from that. So this is part one of our media training series, and part two is Weeding the Social Media Garden, and that will happen at the end of July. And so you can register for that today, and I'm going to post the link, and I'm going to send it to all of you right now. So hopefully you should have that in your chat window or your question and answer window. I'm not really sure what it's called from your perspective. So that link goes to our resources PDF on our website, and the very first resource is the link to register for the next webinar. And I wanted to talk about National Farmers Market Week a little bit. It's from August 5th to August 11th. It's always during the first full week in August, starting on the Sunday and ending on the Saturday. And it's pretty common for markets to start celebrating on the Saturday before, so it would be the 4th to the 11th, or whatever works best for you. We are going to be putting out a lot of resources similar to what we did last year. Coming at the end of this week or early next week, we're going to send you the invitation to legislators, which is basically a template that you can fill in to invite representatives or anyone from your local, state, or national government to come visit you at your farmers market, which it ties into the webinar. It can be a great time for media exposure to get people to come, and they like to get their picture taken and maybe say a few good words about farmers markets and how they impact our communities. So we encourage you to use that template and look for it in one of your member emails coming at the end of the week or early next week. We'll be putting out the social media cheat sheet again, which is basically what it sounds like. We compile a lot of different facts and points of data about farmers markets for you to share on Facebook or Twitter or however you would like. we usually have it ready in the proper number of characters so it's tweetable. And last year we sent that out with our whole National Farmers Market Week package. And we are determined this year to get it out a couple weeks early so that you can be ready to go when National Farmers Market Week arrives. The timing will be the same for our press release template. It will come about 2 weeks before National Farmers Market Week, and it will be a template that you can edit for your own market to send out to the media. We'll also, as we get even closer to National Farmers Market Week, we'll send another media kit that will have all of the information that we're going to send out during Farmers Market Week. So we're going to follow the same theme that we used last year, which I'll talk about in a minute. And basically, we're going to be sending out different press releases on each day, and you'll get those ahead of time. Then we'll also have our glossaries available. We are currently sold out, but we should have more in stock within the next few weeks, or by the end of, we'll have them before Farmers Market Week for sure. We'll also have an updated version of our talking points. All of those are in our Markets Are Up section of our website, and there is a link in that resource page that I already posted. So we do need to hear from everybody to help us make all of that information really excellent. We need to get some data from you about what makes your markets great. Hopefully, along with that invitation to your government officials will be an invitation for you to share with us more information about your farmers market. We need to spread the word about the impact of farmers markets at a national level, and to do that we need statistics or data from your market or your communities or from your farmers. And the topics that we are going to focus on are going to be community education, public health, the economy, farmers, food equity, civic engagement and volunteerism, and farmers markets and how they impact the land and rural renewal. So if you have any information that you could share with us that could tie into any of these topics, and I'm sure you do, please send it our way. You could send it to info@farmersmarketcoalition.org if you can think of something now that you'd like to send us. And now I would love to introduce Colleen Newvine. She's going to present this excellent webinar today, and she is a marketing consultant for her company called Newvine Growing. Newvine Growing provides marketing strategies, social media planning, market research, and more. And her contact information is on that same resources page. She owns that Newvine Growing, and she has a passion for farms, farmers, farmers markets, farm-to-table restaurants. She was a reporter and editor at daily, weekly, and monthly publications, and she served as one of the founding editors of the Inside Business Journal and the business editor at Ann Arbor News. So thank you so much, Colleen, for joining us. We are very happy to have you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm going to switch the screen over to you now.
Great. I'm looking for that notification to come. There it is. Just took a second to pass from you to me, apparently. So let me do this. And hopefully, is everybody seeing my PowerPoint now? You should be seeing a green slide with my smiling face.
Yes.
Great.
You got it.
So great. Just always like to make sure the technology is working before we get ahead of it. So this is the agenda for today. I hope that doesn't scare anybody off. There's a lot of material I'm going to try and pack into our time together. But the most important thing to me is that you all get something valuable from our time together. Like Liz mentioned, I know this is a really busy time for you guys, and so for you to take time out of your day, I want to make sure everybody leaves feeling like you got what made it worth it for you to take that time away. So if I'm going too fast, if anything's confusing, please take advantage of that chat box over on the right of your screen. And Liz, feel free to interrupt me if I've confused anybody or if I'm just zipping too fast. I am in Brooklyn. We talk fast, so I'll slow down if anybody needs that. So let me start a little bit by talking about how reporters work. And that just for those of us who are of a certain age, when you picture a reporter, it's probably Woodward and Bernstein working doggedly to bring down the president and speak truth to power. And the reality is that most reporters spend a lot of their time not meeting sources in dark parking lots, but instead trying to drink from a fire hose of information. This is an actual reporter's desk, a friend of mine. So you see, he works with 2 screens. I know some who work with 4. He's also got his iPad there and his phone, and it's pretty overwhelming, I think, sometimes. In sweeping generalities, reporters are curious people who like to tell stories that haven't already been told to death, either something that's brand new or an interesting twist on a trend or a story that may have been told some other time. Some reporters go into it because they feel this calling to be part of the Fourth Estate. They're acting as the people's watchdog. Others do it because they like writing, or maybe they're adrenaline junkies who like the constant deadlines. Personality-wise, reporters can be a little cynical. Being exposed to some of the worst of humanity, to crime and corruption and all those other big stories all day, can lead us to some dark humor. If you've ever hung around with cops or ER doctors, the effect is the same. Reporters also have kind of a low tolerance for annoyance. So imagine working at Macy's for the entire busy Christmas shopping season and how frazzled you might be by the intensity of day after day of the activity swirling around you. That's a lot what a reporter's day can be like. There's just always something going on. And meanwhile, you're trying to track down sources who aren't always easy to find. You're getting screaming phone calls from people who are unhappy with negative coverage. It's not for everybody. It's a high-demand job, often with long hours and low pay, but it's also a passion job, and many reporters have a hard time imagining doing anything else. And part of the reason that I wanted to start by laying out who reporters are is Liz and I had a great conversation ahead of this session about the original title for this presentation, which was, I believe, Picking Up a Reporter. And I joked that I really believe that it's about building a long-term relationship. And I think if you're building a long-term relationship, it's really helpful to understand who that other person is and what motivates them. You know what you want out of working with the media. I think it's important to know what they're like and what they're looking for from you. So what they're looking for from you, let's start with what makes a good story. So first thing to remember is that journalists really have 2 audiences. They're telling stories for the general public, but they're also having to win over their editor. They're looking for stories that are interesting because it's the first time the story's been told, because it's part of a growing trend, or simply because it's unusual enough to raise curiosity. That might be what makes it interesting to the general public. They also want to feel good pitching it to their bosses. If I pitch this story to my boss and try and get on the front page, will it make me look smart or in the know? Will my boss feel like I'm doing my job well? Part of that is whether the story has what journalists call a news hook, and that's what's new or different. sufficiently so to make it seem like something you could picture being in the news. If you do have a news hook, clearly communicate that when you're trying to pitch a story. Are you doing something that's part of a national trend? Or are you the first one locally to do something that's new? Or has your market doubled its revenue in the last year? Whatever that news is, share it clearly with the journalist in succinct layman's terms. Try to use what I like to describe as the kinds of language you would use talking about your work at Thanksgiving dinner to Aunt Mabel. So is it part of a larger trend? Is it timely? Timely is a big one. So if I could do this story now or in November, why now? And boy, especially for the internet, photos and video, so helpful. These are just a couple of examples of what makes a good story. So let's start with what probably isn't a story. Your market is going to be open this Saturday from 9 to 4, just like it is every Saturday. So, you know, there's nothing new or timely or trendy there. But it might be a story if this is the first Saturday for your market. You've always been a weekday only or a Sunday market and Saturday's new. Or maybe you've extended your hours. You used to close at 1, now you're staying open till 4. Or maybe there was some question about whether you were going to be open. There was a big storm or a fire or some reason why the fact that you're open wasn't going to be obvious. And here's another example. Your market is going to be celebrating its anniversary. People love to send anniversary press releases, but reporters often ask, so what? So your anniversary is maybe a sentence or a banner, but how can I construct a whole 800-word story around that? So maybe you're having a big party to celebrate and people in your town would like to go because you'll have clowns and a band or something. Maybe you have photos from your first market and you can show how it's grown and how times have changed, and we can make fun of what people were wearing at your first market or anything like that. Remember, photos and video really helpful to journalists. Maybe your founders are available to talk about why they established the market and whether the market has in fact accomplished those goals. So just thinking about what kind of fleshes out your story idea can be the difference between getting a call back or sort of sending your press release out into the ether and having nothing happen. So when we asked you to register, or I'm sorry, when you registered, we asked you a few questions to tell us a bit about yourself. And 19 of you told us that you'd never done press releases or you never do. So here are some tips on getting started. What should be in a press release? Contact information. You would be surprised how many press releases skip a name, an email, and a phone number. If you write a great story and a reporter can't get back in touch with you, they're not going to go to that extra effort to, track you down and get the FBI out looking for you. Make it easy for them. Keep it short and straightforward. A page, that same guidance that you hear about a resume. You want to hit the high points quickly, get to your news right away. You want to make the reporter's job easy. For example, if the release is about an event, put the date and time in the headline and then maybe bold it in the body of the release. If you have photos or video available, clearly describe what you have and how to request them. Don't attach them. Reporters' email gets really full really fast, and they'll probably be pretty irritated if you send attachments unsolicited. Think about someone skimming hundreds or thousands of releases and make sure what's most important is obvious. So for example, bolding your dates. Provide enough background so that if the reporter isn't familiar with you or your organization, you get them up to speed quickly. So in this template on the left here, they show adding a boilerplate about your organization down at the bottom and a link to your website. So just a couple quick sentences about who you are. Keep your writing clean, and that is, don't use jargon. Use that language that you would use to describe your work to Aunt Mabel, and don't use flowery press release language. Reporters sort of get the ick when they read words like revolutionary or cutting edge or beloved when you're describing yourself, and exclamation points make it even worse. So if you write in a straight, fact-based kind of style, you increase the potential that a reporter might just cut and paste your language directly and put it into their story or on their website. While I'm showing you the anatomy of a good press release, if you have a good story idea, a press release is just one option. A simple email to your local reporter can absolutely do the job. You can write a letter to the editor. That can often be a really nice way to get your news or your opinion out there without the filter of having a reporter interpret it. You can write an op-ed column for the local paper, or I think a lot of radio stations and TV stations used to do these other voices features. Some still do. You could do that. So just remember that as I'm talking about a story, a press release isn't the only option, but I think it's one of the most familiar. So about 20 of you who registered told us that you do press releases more than once a month. And for those of you who may have a nice archive of press releases, this is sort of a way to wring more life out of them. If you have a media section on your website that archives all of your press releases and pulls together all of the ingredients for a story in one place, maybe a reporter will find your press release a year after you wrote it, and that's okay. The ultimate goal is getting them to write about you, and whether that happens an hour after you wrote it or a year after you wrote it, it still did its job. So let's talk a little bit about how to pitch your story. So you've written your press release, then what? So I'm just going to go ahead and put all of these up and talk a little bit about being on the receiving end. When I was business editor at the Ann Arbor News, a couple times a day, I used to take my mail and faxes over to the recycling bin, and I'd pull up a chair, and it would take me a very long time to chuck probably 90% of it straight into the recycling bin. My job was to triage as quickly as possible what our staff would report on and what we wouldn't. So think about opening your mailbox at home, and maybe it's stuffed full. How do you decide what you're going to read carefully, what you're going to skim, and what you're going to throw out unopened? Chances are a handwritten note or letter from someone you know would get your attention way more than the pre-printed Dear Occupant mass mailing or a catalog from a company you don't care about. Reporters are no different. They get an enormous amount of email, faxes, and snail mail, and they need to efficiently figure out what deserves their attention. So a pitch that's tailored to an individual reporter, that shows you know what he covers and clearly conveys why your story seems like something he'd be interested in, can help your story stand out. That takes more time. It's much easier to just sort of do a big anonymous blast to every reporter that you've ever collected in your Outlook email. You need to research the individual news outlet or blog, do a little research on the past stories that reporter's done, choose the right person to personally pitch, write that targeted note. It does take more time, but if you get results, I think you'd rather spend a little more time and get some results than a little less time and get nothing for the effort that you put in. So here are a couple of examples of where you might find a reporter. Media outlets often list the names of reporters, their beats, and their contact information on their websites. This is my hometown newspaper, and you can see that they do that on a contact us page. You can also set up a Google News alert to see who's writing about farmers markets generally, as I have here, or mentioning your market specifically. You can either do that every once in a while if you don't do press releases very often, or you can have this automatically emailed to you so you can keep up on it anytime your market gets mentioned. Here's a Twitter advanced search for anyone tweeting about farmers markets within 10 miles of New Orleans. So if you wanted to find anybody who's mentioning farmers market, this is another way to do it and take advantage of social media. This will be a preview of coming attractions because, as Liz mentioned, we're going to talk about social media in our next session together next month. So once you have all these names and emails, keep them all in a list someplace. It can be low-tech, like a Word file or an Excel file, but you'll want to keep track of who you've pitched, who's written about you, maybe any concerns you've ever had about working with that reporter. This is all part of building that long-term relationship. If you can make a note that a reporter has a kid the same age as yours and maybe they played soccer together, you've always got conversation fodder and you're able to engage that person as a human being instead of just dear occupant. So nearly all of you told us when you registered that you've been interviewed before. If you've ever wished that that had gone a little better, here are some suggestions. So first of all, you often don't need to do the interview immediately, the second the phone rings and it's the local newspaper, the local radio station. You can take the opportunity to prepare. So you can ask the reporter if you can call back in a few minutes. You're right in the middle of something. Can you call back in an hour, 10 minutes, whatever it takes for you to get in the right headspace and quickly gather some thoughts and some materials. So once you've bought yourself that extra time, then you can begin to do some preparation. When I started doing media training for faculty members at University of Michigan about a decade ago, I frequently heard smart researchers there say that they'd worked their whole career to become an expert on whatever their topic was. And they certainly couldn't reduce everything they knew to a soundbite. That was just really frustrating with them. And I get their point. It's hard to come up with a sentence or two that encapsulates the most important aspect of any topic. And it can feel like it minimizes the complexity of a big idea that you're passionate about. But if you know that the reporter is likely looking for a concise quote to put into his story, who would you rather have making the decision about what that quote says? You or the reporter? You know your topic better than anybody. You should be the one making that priority decision about what you emphasize, not just sort of letting the reporter guess what's most important. So you can help to emphasize that. So to be clear, the reporter has the option to ask any questions and to use as much or as little of your interview in that final story, but you can help influence the decision with your preparation. So first, you're going to craft 3 short, crisp, concise statements, and these are in lay language. This is that Aunt Mabel Thanksgiving table language, and you're going to practice saying those statements. Can you get them out of your mouth in language and make it feel natural? Or do you always feel like you're trying to recite a poem in 5th grade that doesn't make any sense to you? If you can't say them, you need to revise them. Then make a list of questions you can imagine the reporter asking you based on that background that you asked for when the reporter called. And practice using those 3 ideas to answer the potential questions. If you're trying to figure out how that might work, we're heading into the presidential election. Watch how politicians handle questions in a debate. They quickly tackle the question that they were asked, and then they pause for effect. They use a transition phrase for emphasis, something like, and that's why it's absolutely essential that, and they conclude with one of their key campaign messages. You could ask them about whether they like vanilla or chocolate ice cream most, and they're going to come back to something about the economy or healthcare. Making use of your key messages, will be so much easier if you know something about what the reporter needs. So let's say the reporter calls and says they're doing a story about farmers market. Are they asking about what food is available at the market this weekend, who shops there, SNAP usage? Is your city council fighting about a parking lot near your market? Knowing that will help you tailor the messages and help you come up with that possible list of questions and do that mapping between them. I suggest that once you've got those talking points written, that maybe you write them on a Post-it note and stick it on the side of your computer monitor, or maybe you write them on a note in your cell phone so that any time a reporter calls, you've got those available, especially if they're likely to be the same talking points throughout your season. So here are a couple of just real nuts and boltsy kinds of suggestions for preparing for your interview. Of course, most of these would apply on the phone as well, which is probably the most common interview tool. You definitely want to minimize your distractions and your background noise and have your background material available. I try and remind people that when you're talking to a reporter, everything is on the record. I used to get some of the best quotes and the best information once I put my notebook away, and then the second I walked away, I would grab my notebook back out of my bag and scribble it down. When you're talking to a radio or TV reporter, watch out for your bad habits, like if you get nervous and you tap your pen, or you drum your fingers, or anything like that that might create bad audio. Watch out for that. The second point on broadcast was a real aha for me once I got into media training. The TV reporter or the radio reporter wants a good, clean audio clip as much as you want to sound intelligent. So if you trip over your words, or you're going to sneeze, or you realize that you've gone off on some long ramble and you lost your point, you can simply say, "Do you mind if I start over again?" Pause, and that's to help them be able to edit the video, and then start over. You might also be interviewed by email. That's becoming more common, and if so, I would just ask you to please write answers that sound like a human being would actually say those words. When I get email responses that sound like a lawyer writing a lease, it's really hard for me to work those into a story and not sound really stiff. So sometimes it's bad news, and several of you told us that you have had to respond to negative media attention. You only have to watch the national news for about 10 minutes to see wars and plane crashes and celebrities behaving badly, and to figure out that unfortunately this could be what makes your phone ring. It could be something general like an egg recall or spinach contamination, or even worse, it could be something specific to you in your market. Maybe someone tripped and fell or got sick on something they ate at your market, or there's a fight with one of your vendors saying that they're being treated unfairly. If your first instinct is to blurt out no comment and hang up, it's understandable. This is really scary. But unfortunately, that's sort of the media equivalent of being accused of a crime and not hiring a defense attorney. The reporter will probably still do the story, just without your point of view getting represented. So instead, what you want to do is thank the reporter for calling to get your input. You appreciate that you're getting to tell your side. Ask when the reporter's deadline is, and if you can call back. This is the same thing we do even when it's good news. Ask as many questions as possible about the story so that you're not surprised when the interview comes, and then take a deep breath. You know, very few people have ever died of an interview, so it's scary, but it's not terminal. And then we're going to put together a plan to respond, and that's the same idea. You're going to come up with your 3 clear messages about, for example, why consumers should trust their local agriculture, or about how you try and be fair to all of your vendors. If there's anything at all that you think could be a legal issue, you're of course going to call your lawyer before you're talking about someone suing the market because they fell. And then you'll use the same tips that we already talked about, that you'll come up with that list of potential questions. You'll match your talking points that you've prepared. You'll have your talking points handy when you call back. And I think it's just so important not to be defensive. Be clear, be human, and don't be defensive. I think sometimes the most important thing that you can do when it's bad news is to understand if someone's making a complaint. You know, you don't want to go too far down that path necessarily, but if you can say something like, we understand that our market's really popular and that it's really frustrating for vendors who can't all get in. We wish we had room for twice as many vendors. We just don't, and we're frustrated by that too. Sometimes just acknowledging the other side or acknowledging that you screwed up can show so much humanity and compassion that it can diffuse the potential conflict. Of course, that's the same thing you might use if you were dealing with a lot of other kinds of conflict. So if it doesn't go well, and of course, unfortunately, this can happen. I used to get people calling and screaming at me that they were misquoted. So I grabbed the story. Of course, this was in the old days when it was mostly in print. Now I'd probably call it up on the web. I'd grab the story and I'd go paragraph by paragraph and ask them where they were misquoted. Did you say this? Yes. Did you say that? Yes. And often what the conclusion was, yes, they said all of that, but they just didn't like it. They didn't like the negative tone of the story. They wished that they had not said something they did, even though they did. So I would just encourage you to, before you pick up the phone and call a reporter and say that you've been misquoted, if you're mad at a story, take that same deep breath and think, did they accurately report on a situation and I just really don't like it? Or was I misquoted? Is there some inaccuracy in there? Is there something that's factually incorrect? A former boss of mine in public relations liked to say that working with the media is a blunt object, not a surgical tool. So once you send a press release out or give an interview, unfortunately, you just aren't in control of how the reporter chooses to use that information. So it might be very important to you or to your board, for example, that the name of your market be written a very certain specific way, such as you always capitalize "the" in front of the name of your market, or you always include the name of the municipality that sponsors you. A lot of that just doesn't matter that much to reporters. They do want to be accurate, but they're more interested in conveying information clearly to his or her audience than about the politics of an organization. So they might say something general like the farmers market in New York City without getting the specific that it's sponsored by the green markets. Your goal should be accuracy. It should also be developing an ongoing relationship of mutual trust and understanding. So I would just say, think about your relationship with your spouse. You can fight about being right every time, or sometimes you can preserve the peace in the name of the relationship. So I would say sometimes you might just want to pick and choose your battle. I'm not saying let incorrect information stand, but just decide how important it is. If it's important, politely call and ask for a correction. Maybe offer some supporting material for future reference that shows what it is you think the reporter might have gotten wrong. And if the story was negative but accurate, say thank you. You know, if they tried to walk that fine line of being balanced between two contentious sides, reporters don't often hear thank you, and that'll go a long way toward building your credibility. So some final thoughts on do's and don'ts. I'll just put all of these up all at once. So a lot of people will email a press release, and then 20 minutes later they'll call the reporter and say something like, I'm just calling to see if you got the press release. You know, email's been around for a really long time, and you're probably pretty sure that the email went through. If you wouldn't do that, if you were sending an email to a friend asking them to dinner this weekend, don't do it to a reporter. They'll just find it annoying. What you could do is wait a couple of days and follow up with some kind of additional information, or you're having an event and you just wanted to make sure that they had the details about where they're going to park because parking is a problem, or you know, it's some additional piece of information that you're offering up, thinking in terms of what's going to make their job easier. And going back to that analogy of a friend you're inviting over for dinner. If you wouldn't call someone and say, why are you being so rude and not RSVPing when I'm clearly being so generous in inviting you to dinner? But you might say, you know, I'm going to be going shopping tonight, and I just want to make sure that I get the right amount of wine. It softens it. So think in that kind of terms if you're going to do a follow-up. I mentioned earlier, don't send unsolicited attachments. If you think about hundreds or thousands of emails pouring into a reporter's inbox every day, you can imagine what 10 megs of photos could do to that. Don't pitch every single person in the newsroom. I think you want to be a little bit more tailored to who the right person is. Don't pitch yourself for a story that just ran. The number of times when I would get someone calling or emailing saying, oh, you just did that story this Sunday about summer camps. I run a summer camp. Well, great, but I'm not going to do another story about summer camps until next year. So unless you are thinking about that long-term relationship and you can couch it in, I'm so sorry you didn't know that we offer free babysitting on Saturdays. Can I just offer this to you for your background so that next time you're working on a story like that, you have it. And don't ask to read the story in advance. It's sort of, it's one of those things that probably irritates reporters disproportionately. It bugs them more than it should. But what they're expecting you're going to do is take a look at quotes that you actually said and then rewrite them into sort of press release-ese, that sort of stiff English that no person ever actually says. Or you're going to say, oh, well, I said that, but I didn't mean to. But you can instead show that you sort of understand how their world works by asking if they would read back your quotes. So you can make sure that they got you quoted correctly if you have any concern about the fact that maybe it's a contentious topic and you just want to make sure that they got the nuance right. We've already talked about a lot of these. Make sure you're learning the names of the reporters who cover all of the relevant topics to you. So it could be food, it could be your city hall reporter, it could be your entertainment reporter because maybe you have live music at your market. Think in terms of all of the different aspects of your market and the names and emails of those reporters. Be responsive. Sometimes a half an hour or a half a day can make all the difference in whether the reporter still needs you or not. So if you get a call from a reporter and you think, oh, today's really busy, I'll get back to them tomorrow, that window of opportunity may have passed. So I know you're all very busy, but to the best of your ability, be responsive, even if it means you have to say something like, I only have 15 minutes before I have to dash, but is there something I can do to help you before I have to go? related to that, pay attention to your timing. So that includes everything from planning ahead. Please don't send a press release on Friday afternoon if your event is Saturday. It's often just too late, so maybe you want to send it, I would say, depending on the publication, 3 weeks in advance, and then maybe follow up 3 or 4 days ahead of the event. And also think about the reporter's deadline. So if you're calling someone in a newsroom environment, the very first thing you should ask is, are you on deadline? Or is now an okay time to talk? It shows a sensitivity for the fact that they may be 10 minutes from having to press send on a story that their editor is breathing down their throat on. So just be sensitive to the fact that reporters live under a very time-sensitive kind of crunch all the time. If you can't be a help, offer other sources. When I was doing public relations at Michigan, had a colleague who was great at this. If we didn't have a faculty member who was an expert on something, she would find someone at Michigan State or Ohio State, or she might Google for 20 minutes or ask our faculty who the expert was at that. And that meant that every single time that reporter that she had just helped was going to think of her almost like calling the library reference desk. It was going to be one call, and even if Michigan didn't have someone, they were going to get help. And your mom taught you this, but it always applies to everything. Say thank you. When I would get a thank you email or a thank you card in the mail, it meant so much to me. So many times the only time I would hear from someone is if they were ticked off about a contentious story. So someone who took the time to say thank you really made an impression on me. And if that goal is a long-term relationship, I'm not talking about sort of being a brown noser, but a sincere thank you really can go a long way, just like your mom taught you with sending thank you notes. So I want to leave ample time here for questions. So if I was racing through, I apologize, but I did want to get through lots and lots of information and make sure that we left enough time for all of you to ask whatever's on your mind.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just going to read through a couple of comments that we have so far.
Great.
Eileen's given us a couple of good comments, and the first one was kind of funny. She said her favorite hook was when she called a farmer looking for something, anything new, and he or she said, well, I've got turnips, and that was all she had. So she sent that lead to a reporter, and the regional paper ran a brief with the headline, Shop of Crops has turnips. Fascinating. Melissa Lewis.
Yeah, so sometimes it's a slow news day, and they'll take almost anything.
When interviewing, is there a good, sorry, this is from Sheila. When interviewing, is there a good phrase to use when we might not know the answer to the reporter's questions without sounding completely incompetent?
Okay, so so they've asked you a question and you just don't know the answer. Is that what Sheila's getting at? Did I follow that right?
Yes.
I think it's perfectly fine to say so. You could either say, wow, that's a great question, and I'm sorry I don't know the answer, or that's a great question. I think I have that on my hard drive someplace. Can I get back to you? Or if you have no idea what they're even talking about, feel free to ask them to clarify. Something like, I'm not sure I follow, but let me try answering your question, and if I've missed it, please tell me. It's a conversation. So if someone asks you a confusing question and you can't answer it until you understand the question, I think you can absolutely feel free to ask them to clarify.
Great. What are some of the pros and cons of talking to reporters about potentially controversial topics, like political topics, farm bill, GMOs, etc.?
Okay. Yeah, I didn't talk as much about controversy when I was going through story ideas, but obviously that's the kind of stuff that makes the front page. So when you think back to your high school literature class, most good novels involve conflict and hopefully some kind of resolution, if only real life always involved resolution. So if you have some way to give input on a story that involves conflict or controversy, you might get better play than we have turnips. So for example, if you wanted to put yourself out there as a resource about the Farm Bill and why it matters, you might end up getting more attention, more people reading that story, maybe better placement on the news outlet's website or in print, or they play it at the top of the hour on the radio station. The downside is I think you have to be a little bit more on your game. So there might be a little bit of risk associated if you're putting yourself out there talking about whether GMOs should be labeled or whether shoppers should only buy organic. You might risk offending some of your vendors. You might risk offending some of your shoppers. So I would think really in terms of what does your market stand for? If your market believes that one of its primary missions is advocacy for the small farmer or advocacy for organic foods, for example, then it absolutely makes sense that without hesitation, you should be out there on topics that fit with your mission. If that's not something you've explicitly talked about, then I would just sort of try and figure out how you can be out there as a knowledgeable, credible source and be mindful of what that potential downside is if you go too far. And then one kind of final thought on that question. If you're in a big story about, for example, the Farm Bill, you might give a half-hour or 45-minute interview because it's a big, complex topic that the reporter might be trying to wrap his head around, and you might only get 3 paragraphs in the final story, and that might feel like, oh, why did I spend so much time? But if more people are reading that story because it's more interesting to more people or it's played better in the news outlet, maybe 3 paragraphs in a more popular story is more beneficial than 12 paragraphs in one that fewer people read.
I have a lot of questions about press releases.
Okay.
So the first one from Erin, it goes back to what you were saying about not doing follow-ups, and just to clarify, if you're sending out a press release 3 weeks in advance, it's appropriate to follow up as the event approaches, or is there a way to follow up appropriately?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. So I'll give you a real-life example, and the way that you put this into practice might might vary slightly depending on your publication that you're dealing with. So let's say you have a monthly magazine or a monthly entertainment publication in your community, and you also have a daily newspaper. Their lead times might be really different. So in order to get into the calendar of the monthly, you might need to send that in 6 weeks ahead of time. So you want to be aware of what their deadlines are, and maybe you send it by their deadline, and then follow back up just to say, did I give you everything you needed in order to get that into the calendar, or was there anything missing? If you're talking to a daily newspaper whose lead time isn't quite so long, maybe you send it 3 weeks in advance. You've got maybe your opening day of market, right? So you send it 3 weeks before your opening day. Then maybe 3 or 4 days before market, then it's that idea of advancing the information. Just wanted to get in touch with you. I'm going to be on site starting at 7 o'clock that morning. Let me give you my cell phone number, though, because I might be out and about talking to my vendors. If you're looking for a place to park, go ahead and call me. I can get you a reserved spot, and I'll let you know how to get there if you're going to be coming. If you're going to send a photographer, let me know because blah, blah, blah. So as opposed to just, did you get it or are you blowing me off, you're sort of adding to the conversation and thinking about what else would they need to be able to do their job.
That makes a lot of sense. And it ties into Alice's question. You brought up publications that are monthly, and she was wondering if you had, first of all, are press releases appropriate for those types of publications? And she was asking specifically about foodie publications like edible communities. Do you have any advice for creating relationships with those kinds of publications? And they usually have freelance staff, and sometimes the ones around me have unpaid staff. Also volunteer reporters. Yeah, Edible is a great example. They do beautiful work. They're a perfect place for stories about farmers markets, and a lot of their content comes from freelancers. So you have a couple different ways you could go there. One is developing a relationship with the editor of the magazine, whether that's Edible or something like it. And if you get response from that person, just continue to go to that person, and if they like your idea, then the editor can assign the story out. You can also develop a relationship with the freelancer directly. And sometimes the benefit of that is if they really like you or your idea, if Edible doesn't go for it, they might pitch it to 3 or 4 or 5 other outlets that they're working with. Depending on who the freelancer is, they may have a relationship with multiple publications, so you might increase your opportunity to get a yes. And can we talk a little bit about some press release technicalities and how to structure press, sorry, I'm cutting out because of call waiting. Let's see, the sample that we put up from FMC is a lot longer than one of our participants usually uses, so they're wondering about the length. Another person is wondering about just what's the basic structure, how do you set it up, how do you break down the information, and how much detail do you include? Sure. And so one thing I will mention for people is in the resource links that Liz is going to share with you, there are a couple of different templates for press releases. So you can kind of crib from those
as an idea of a starting point. It's really, I would say, part art and part science. So I have had colleagues who had the best success with only doing like 1-paragraph emails to reporters that they had relationships with, and they never even bothered with press releases. They would just keep it short, sweet, really direct about what the good story was, and move on. And the reporters that they worked with really responded to that because they could quickly glance at it and decide if they were interested. I think in general, keeping in mind that the reporter is probably going to do, you know, depending on the outlet, maybe 1 or 2 stories a day, and they're getting hundreds of press releases, really just argues for, think about clarity and getting straight to the point as quickly as possible. And I'm a fan of, if you're doing a press release, let's say you do that in the 1-page template like we showed from FMC. When you email that to the reporter, maybe you just do 2 sentences ahead of that saying, you know, "Dear Liz, since you're so interested in issues of downtown, I thought you would be interested that we've been working with the Downtown Development Authority to expand parking at Farmers Market. Here's the press release is below. Call me if you have any questions." So you sort of split the difference in being really short and sweet and then almost using the press release as background. But just in terms of structure, I'm a fan of contact information up at the top, a really direct, unflowery headline, 1 line, the kind of nuts and bolts of what the story is about in the first paragraph, you know, the kind of idea of inverted pyramid. If I only read one thing, if I read that first paragraph, I'll at least get the main parts, maybe some additional supporting material after that first paragraph, and then the boilerplate on who the market is at the very end.
Great.
Did I answer the question, or did I miss it?
No, I think you answered it very well.
Okay.
I'm sitting here thinking about how to do my future press releases. It is super helpful, Erin says.
Good. Good.
Oh, and you mentioned that you shouldn't send a press release on a Friday afternoon. So is it true that Mondays and Fridays are bad days for reporters to get information?
I will say there's sort of a cliche that if a press release comes in after about 3 o'clock on Friday, it's probably from someone hoping to get one past the goalie. So they're probably sending a press release and hoping that you'll overlook it. So, I mean, we just always knew it was like somebody filing for bankruptcy, or, you know, they weren't hoping you were going to pick up the phone and do something. Now, that's not to say never send a press release on a Monday or a Friday. But if I were trying to get maximum results, I would probably go for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Great.
You know, and again, this is getting to know who the reporters are that you're dealing with. If you're pitching a freelancer who works for Edible and you know that they have a day job and they do their work for Edible nights and weekends, you know 7 o'clock on Thursday might be the best time to reach them. It might not be during work hours.
Oh, okay. I knew I had another little question for you. Is it appropriate to include a picture in your press release? Does it matter, or is it useful?
I wouldn't include it as an attachment the first time, simply because, and I mean, more of us have bigger email boxes. Like I love my Gmail because I can't seem to overflow it, although I keep trying. But depending on what the corporate email account is that the reporter's using, if you and 400 other people send unsolicited attachments and they're on vacation, they could have a problem. So what I might do is, if you have a Flickr account, post your 5 or 6 best photos on Flickr and include a link. Or if you have a media section on your website, post your photos to your website and include that link in your press release or your pitch, and explicitly say, you know, we have beautiful photos of children and baby pigs, or like whatever, what, you know, people love cute animals and kids, so you combine the two and you almost can't lose. But I wouldn't send it as an attachment. If you really, really must, make it small. I mean, just as teeny tiny as possible so it doesn't crash somebody's inbox.
Okay. I have 2 more quick questions, and I think we should wrap up after that. And the first one is, I don't get any reporter interest from my press releases. Am I wasting my time?
This is sort of the if a press release falls in the forest thing. There are lots of reasons to do press releases. Obviously, getting a reporter to write a story is one of them, but it's not the only one. So if you also put that press release on your website and it's written well, then it's part of your search engine optimization, and when people are Googling for whatever topic you've written that press release about, it helps them find you. If you post it on your website and then you link to it from your Facebook or your Twitter account, it helps to communicate that same information directly to people who are already interested in your market. Maybe you can also use some or all of it in your email newsletter. And like I mentioned with the media section of your website, it's not like it's a one-to-one relationship that you send your release out today and the only thing that counts is the stories that you get written tomorrow. You might post it there today, and a year from now, a reporter might find you. So its value might be farther down the line. I would say if you're getting what feels like no results, it's a good reason to come back and say, what could I do better? Could I develop a better relationship with reporters? Are they just not opening my emails because they don't know me? Could I write better subject lines when I email them? Is there something I could do to better illustrate what my news hook is? So it's not necessarily a sign of failure, but it does kind of point to, do I want to tweak something that I'm doing?
I love your suggestion of putting it on the website and getting better search engine optimization. I wouldn't have thought of that.
I've heard from some people that's becoming predominantly how they think of the value of their press releases. Like if a reporter writes about them, that's great, but they're almost thinking about it more in terms of content for their website than they are getting immediate press coverage.
Right. And so lastly, are press conferences or other media events worth organizing?
The answer to that is it depends. So if you think you have sufficient relationship with enough reporters in your community that you could invite them and they would come, it can be worth it. So this is sort of the, you know, it's a drag to throw a party and nobody comes. So let's say you're planning to expand the market and construction's going to start in the fall, and you want to have a press conference to show the plans and kind of walk people through the site and show them where the construction is going to take place. What you don't want to do is position that you're having this big event, you know, it's a ribbon cutting and the mayor's going to be there and one reporter comes. I mean, it just sort of feels lame. So I would kind of evaluate on a case-by-case basis, what's your local market like? Are there enough media outlets to even have multiple reporters come? Do the reporters at those media outlets show an interest in the market? Or would your time be better spent doing one-on-one events? You know, would you, rather than spending all of the time that it would take to plan that event, could you instead do 3 or 4 or 5 just individual coffee meetings at the convenience of those individual reporters? So I would think in terms of what's your market like and how big is the news?
Excellent. I've got so many ideas right now for ways to promote and do different events, and you've just really inspired me. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
This is really wonderful.
I hope everybody else feels that way.
I think they do. So thank you. And our next webinar is with you, and we'll be talking about social media, and which I think ties in with this last comment perfectly, because I know that like social media moms have done, like, they've gathered at farmers markets and done like a tweet fest and I don't know, neat things. So I would love to talk to you more about that. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we are really excited about our next webinar. Please register and have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye, Colleen. Thank you.